Our guest today is Secretary of Transportation for the state of Illinois. He has served in this position for nearly 3 years. Our guest today leads 10 offices that serve the transportation needs of Illinois across multiple modes in rural, suburban, and urban environments. Number 2 oversees a $3 billion operating budget that supports a workforce of 4,800 employees. And number 3 has oversight of more than $3.4 billion in capital projects. He earned his bachelor's degree in business administration from Illinois State University. But more importantly, he told me when I first met him a few years back that he was from McHenry, Illinois, where I'm lucky to be from, and that his mother and my mother, who's now in heaven, were bridge partners. Ladies and gentlemen, Randy Blankenhorn. Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that, and it is a true story that our mothers were bridge partners back in the day. It's good to be here. It's good to be back at the City Club. As Jay said, this is my 3rd time, and I'm never sure if he asked me back because he's doing a favor for an old McHenry guy, or if he thinks maybe the 3rd time I'm finally going to get it right. We'll see how that goes. 2.5 years ago, Governor Rauner asked us to take a tour of the state of Illinois, where we visited 39 cities in 25 days, talking to residents, businesses, local officials about why transportation matters to them. We heard not only about the challenges and concerns that they had, but what those challenges meant to people on the ground in our communities. We heard about the deteriorating condition of our facilities, from roads and bridges to transit, rail, airports, and waterways. We heard about unreliable travel times that raised the cost of doing business and kept us from our families longer than it should. We heard that it takes too long to deliver projects that are important to the state of Illinois. We heard that no matter where you live, public transit is important. It's important for our seniors, it's important for young people that don't want to drive, and it's an important option for people to have. We heard that there needs to be better coordination between the private sector, the public sector, between those of us across modes, because at the end of the day, it's one transportation system, and the public doesn't care about who owns what. We heard that we need to be more innovative in how we address the future of transportation in Illinois. We heard that we need to make investment decisions in ways that are more transparent to taxpayers. We heard that transportation funding should be used for transportation and not diverted to other statewide needs. We heard that safety is the ultimate bottom line and that the increasing number of fatalities on our highways is a problem that has to be addressed. And finally, we heard that we must invest in what is Illinois' economic advantage, our infrastructure. We need to do it through user fees, not continuing to borrow money that would become a burden on our children and our grandchildren. And then we need to get out of the boom and bust cycles that have become commonplace here in Illinois. So what have we spent the last 3 years doing in response to this tour? We started by maintaining our existing infrastructure and that being our focus. As my friend and former Secretary Kirk Brown used to say, you don't build an addition when the roof's leaking. We have to focus on maintaining what we have, and we have to do it right. We focused our highway maintenance projects on interstates and the arterials. On transit, we bought buses. We've improved track, the basics of the system, but that's about as far as we can go. We've completed the stimulus-funded elements of the Chicago to St. Louis passenger rail project, making train travel significantly more reliable. Rail can be a comfortable, convenient way to travel between our cities when it's on time. And this is a big step in making that happen. We focused on improving intersections on our arterials and interchanges on our interstates as a ways to relieve congestion. We've added bus on shoulders on the Edens as a follow-up to the successful pilot project that we had on the Stevenson in order to provide for more reliable transit service in those corridors. And Governor Rauner has championed a proposed managed lane project that will significantly improve travel time on the Stevenson with innovative project delivery approach. From start to finish, it still takes way too long to deliver transportation projects. Through Governor Rauner's Rapid Results Initiative, we've undertaken a number of process reviews that will eliminate unnecessary steps in our contracting and our review processes and help to streamline our work. We've submitted over 20 different projects and ideas to USDOT about how to reduce or eliminate federal regulations that drag out streamlining, permitting, environmental, and other federal reviews, and that really cost us time and money as we try to deliver projects. For the first time in my memory, the federal government is actually listening to states. They're interested in what we have to say. They're interested in where we think the transportation system needs to go. And as I continue to remind them, the federal government doesn't actually build anything. States do. And we need to have the flexibility and the resources to do what we need to do here in Illinois to make that system work for us. One of the suggestions that we made to them early on was actually implemented within a month. Got completely rid of a federal regulation that we pointed out was duplicative, that didn't make any sense, and they took action immediately. That's the kind of response we need from our federal government. We've continued to work with industry, our contractors and our engineering firms to come to an agreement on language that would join almost every other state in the nation to utilize design, build, and contract management processes on a select number of projects where they make sense in Illinois. We continue to coordinate not only inside of IDOT but outside with our transportation partners from both the public and the private sectors. We need to continue to work on how to implement the SB 51 procurement policy in a much more meaningful way. We have to be able to have productive conversations with our private sector partners in order to capitalize on the innovation that they bring to the table. We need to partner with our transit agencies, our ports, our local highway agencies, and our airports to remember that it's one transportation system, and we need to work together to deliver what the public expects and what our economy needs. We've pushed our employees to try new things, to not be afraid to make mistakes, and the results have been inspiring. We've encouraged them to see the value of what they do every day. We've challenged them in their work, and we've tried to make them proud of their accomplishments. We've begun to create an environment where what we call the Rule of 85 becomes an option and not a retirement date. We're back to winning regional and national awards. No longer when I'm out at conferences and conventions do I hear, where has Illinois been? We're back engaged, we're back learning from others, and we're back leading in innovation. It's become a way of life for us again, and I see it almost every day as our team finds new ways to get things done. On everything from leading the work groups to embrace and encourage autonomous vehicle development, to the use of drones for inspections and emergency response, to new construction techniques like accelerated bridge construction. When I returned to IDOT, I said that we would become once again the most innovative DOT in the country, and we are well on our way to being there. In between my two IDOT stints, for those of you who don't know, this is my second tour of duty, I was often asked how the department made investment decisions. Why this project and not that one? And too many times I didn't have an answer. We can't continue to have that. I cannot continue to not have answers for why we make project selection decisions. Governor Rauner's made it a priority for us to be goal-driven and transparent in how we spend taxpayers' money. We've created evaluation processes and tools that make our decisions more easily understood by the public and by our partners here in this room. We focused on what we heard 2.5 years ago about why transportation matters, and we've developed criteria that relate to the economy, to community development, and to quality of life issues. We've stopped making promises we can't keep, and we're working with communities and coalitions about how to address their immediate needs while not giving up on their long-term goals. The best example that we have going now is in West Central Illinois, where we've been working on a 4-lane bridge for decades across the Illinois River in Beardstown. The cost of that bridge is $170 million, money that we don't have today and we're unlikely to have in the near future. In the meantime, we're spending millions of dollars maintaining that bridge, wasting good money after bad. So we worked with the community to develop a two-lane option that we can get under construction today, designing it so that when the money's there and the need is there, we can expand it with a twin span right next door to accommodate future need. These are the conversations we're having with communities all across this state about how can we deliver something today without giving up the dream. The voters clearly said last November that transportation revenues should be spent on transportation, and overwhelmingly passed the lockbox constitutional amendment. User fees should be the primary mechanism that we use to fund infrastructure improvements, and this is a step in the right direction. However, despite the impression that this would create new revenues for transportation, it hasn't and it won't. It will prevent future sweeps, it will preclude existing resources from being diverted, but the truth is those diversions had already stopped for the most part already. I spent a lot of time this last spring explaining that the lockbox didn't give us any new money and that our ability to invest more in our transportation system had not improved. I think this effort confused the public and our elected officials who thought that it had. Honestly, I think we wasted an opportunity to have a serious conversation about the needs of our transportation system and creating new mechanisms to fund transportation sustainability in a sustainable way for the long term. And that's where our focus has been, is how do we fund transportation sustainably for the long term? My favorite saying from Governor Rauner is that he doesn't want to fix transportation for 2 years. He wants to fix it for a generation. That's how we have to think, and we have to start to have that conversation. We have completed some important projects over the last couple of years, including I-55 at Lakeshore Drive, the new flyover between the Dan Ryan and Eisenhower Expressways, which is really the centerpiece of the Jane Byrne Interchange project. The Chicago to St. Louis passenger rail project is significantly complete, with new stations open in Dwight, in Pontiac, and Alton, with new stations opening next month in Lincoln and Carlinville, and with the new Joliet station coming online next year. We started new major bridges in the Quad Cities and in the Champ Clark Bridge in Western Illinois. We built our first dedicated bike lane on a state public roadway. We opened a new Wilson Street station with the CTA in the city of Chicago. We funded equipment and station improvements for Metro and Pace. We've completed CREATE projects that have made freight rail transportation more efficient and have come together with the city of Chicago, with Cook County, and with our railroad partners to submit what we think is truly a winning proposal for funding the 75th Street Corridor Improvement Project, the linchpin project for reducing freight congestion not only here in the region, but across the country. Yet, there are still simple problems that we can't solve, despite Governor Rauner and the department's best efforts. We haven't gotten legislation approval for design build that will truly provide an option for us to deliver projects cheaper, more efficiently, and with new innovative solutions. We haven't had any legislative action on the I-55 managed lane projects that will bring private sector investment and provide new options for the traveling public in a corridor that is extremely congested. And without having that new capacity on I-55, we continue to have to push back the reconstruction and the modernization of the Eisenhower Expressway, the region's most unreliable highway facility. We've lived through unprecedented times, and through the dedication of our staff and our partners in this room, we've survived. In 2015, $500 million was swept from transportation funds. In 2016, we went an entire year without an operating budget. In 2017, the road fund took on $300 million in obligations that were formerly paid out of general revenue, and yet we survived. But you know, I'm tired of surviving. I'm tired of keeping the lights on, from elected officials to the public, from labor to chambers of commerce and economic development organizations. Everyone talks about wanting to invest more in transportation, and yet nothing happens. We say that transportation is the state's true economic advantage in a global economy, and yet we don't invest in that advantage. We talk about the need to connect the communities and to provide the infrastructure that will help create jobs at the local level, and we don't seem to get beyond the talk. We say that we want to create opportunity for all of Illinois, for our DBEs, for our small businesses, and yet what have we done? How many of you think that we need to have a serious conversation about how to raise revenue here in the state of Illinois? Well, I think that's actually the problem. Telling people that we need to raise revenue doesn't sell. When we say that we can give us more money and we'll fix your problems, that isn't a message that people will get excited about. It's not a message, given the public's lack of trust in government, that they actually even believe. Having coalitions that are led by those who directly benefit from increased funding breeds skepticism. I've said in the past that we need to be singing a new song, but I now believe that it's more than that. We need a new vision, we need a new message, and we need a new coalition. We need to define a much different vision than what we've talked about in the past. A vision that describes what people, communities, and business want, need, and expect from their transportation system. We need to create a vision for transportation, and we have to start that process by not talking so much among ourselves, but to start talking to the users of the system, to transit riders and shippers, to businesses moving goods and drivers trying to get to work, to environmental groups that want us to be smart about how we improve our system, and bicyclists and pedestrians who want to live close enough to work so that they don't have to drive, to seniors who can't or shouldn't drive, and young people who don't want to, from technology experts that are going to create safer ways to move people, and those who are creating new communications tools to do it more efficiently. This vision starts with connections. Connecting communities, connecting economies, connecting people to each other, and connecting them from where they are to where they need to go. It's about how our highways and transit lines aren't about getting people through town. It's about our state highways are in fact our community's main streets, and how transit stops become the focus of thriving downtowns. It's about how transportation improvements create construction jobs, but more importantly, create opportunity for long-term economic growth, providing the foundation for job creation for our children in the communities where they grew up. It's about providing access for people to be able to live where they want to live because they have a transportation system that works to get them from where they are to where they need to go, wherever that may be. And mostly, they have to trust us that we'll do it right. We need to develop a message that people can relate to. Not those of us in the business, but our neighbors and our families. We say that transportation is key to the economy, but what does that mean to a person looking for work? What does that mean for a community that's trying to diversify their tax base? We need to explain how transportation actually supports economic development. We say that freight is vital for Illinois, but what people think when they hear freight is sitting at a railroad crossing waiting for a train, or wondering why they have so many trucks in their neighborhood. They aren't thinking about how their groceries got to the supermarket or how their TV got into their living room. They don't think that transportation is a major cost component in the price of almost all goods, and that the price goes up when we don't do it efficiently. People don't think about congestion in the statistical terms that we do. They think about how long it takes them or their goods to get to where they need to go, about how much time they spend in traffic, about how much time they waste because the system isn't reliable, about how crowded highways lead to accidents and deaths that take their loved ones. This is the message that they care about. People think that we should invest in public transit. They think we should invest in it mostly for their neighbors. And we need to explain in terms that they can relate to why a robust transit system helps users and non-users alike, how it more efficiently moves people to free up access and capacity for cheaper, more efficient goods movement, how it provides better access to jobs, to education, to hospitals, and other quality of life issues that are vital to their daily lives. We need to create a message that doesn't start with revenue. It's not about more revenue. Revenue might be the most important part of delivering this vision, but revenue is a strategy, not a goal. We have to talk about what this revenue buys, what it gives the public, our communities, our businesses, and we have to do it in a way where everyone understands that we have underinvested for far too long. That without action, our transportation system is a burden rather than an asset for our economy and for the quality of their lives. It's a new message for a new day. And we need a new coalition. For most of the people in this room, you can no longer be the face of this effort. We have to broaden the coalition substantially and have the voices our leaders hear be those who rely on us to get it right every day. It has to be more grassroots in nature, building on the frustrations and the hopes that people have and how transportation can make their lives better. It has to be geographically diverse. This is a big state, and the needs of the people here in Chicago are not the same as those in Peoria or Rockford, nor are those the same as those in Decatur or in rural Illinois. The coalition has to be inclusive enough so it solves problems across Illinois in a way that is fair and in a way that's accountable. And it has to be big. It has to be a message to our leaders that our transportation system matters, and the voices we engage have to be loud enough to make that point. And so it begins today. Today we start to write that new song around a vision that people from all walks of life, from all across Illinois, will rally behind. Today we craft a message that inspires people to get engaged in improving their future. Today we reach out and find people who will motivate our leaders to action. Today we begin to build a coalition that believes that the future of Illinois depends on a transportation system that works. Today we start on a new path to realize that vision and to find the resources to make it a reality. Today it starts. Thank you so much for having me.
No, don't go away. Thanks, Randy.
I'm not taking questions, I'm sorry.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, just pass them up to me. Alex, we have some questions. Miles?
If I don't like it, can I give it back?
Okay. The first question, Randy, comes from Peter Scozzi with the BNSF Railway. What can we do to get the House to pass the resolution for I-55 managed lanes? Could you please explain the process?
Well, I'll explain the process, and I'm not sure I can answer what we do next because I think we've tried about everything. There is enabling legislation that allows Illinois to do P3s in a general way. But that legislation says that we have to have a joint resolution of the House and the Senate in order to move any specific project forward. We submitted that resolution 2 years ago. This is a project that everybody wants. There is no opposition. It's going to help that corridor. As I said earlier, we have to have I-55 before we can get to 290. It's a regional problem that we have to address. I sat in 6 hearings on this. They don't do 6 hearings to pass a tax increase. So, you know, I'm not sure what the game is, to be perfectly frank, but it's not one we're winning. And it's not one that I think that our legislators are hearing enough from people that care about this. There needs to be pressure, and that pressure can't come from IDOT. Honestly, that pressure can't come from the governor. I sometimes tell the governor to quit saying how much he likes it because it works the other way for me. But it's going to have to come from the people that care about that part of the state and about that part of the region. We have to put pressure on. There's no way that we're going to be able to build this project anytime soon under traditional methods. This is the way to make it happen. This is the way to move it along. And honestly, it's a new experiment for us. In a managed lanes case where we have dynamic tolling that keeps the facility operating at a better level of service, we think it's the start to try something that we could expand to very often other parts of the region. But we have to have this first. So at the end of the day, it's about getting your House members to realize that this is important to the state, it's important to the region, it's important to the traveling public, and then we need to get something done.
Thank you. So I think Randy is suggesting that if you haven't talked to your House members, get in contact with them and explain to them how vital this is to the future of the state. Thank you. Okay, this is from Ben Brockschmidt, who's a City Club member, as is Peter Scozzi, by the way. Ben's with the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. His question: how do you see the engagement and role of local governments changing as technology changes in transportation?
So I think that we have to think about, again, as I said earlier, the system is a system, and how we fund that system, how we operate that system, how we maintain that system is going to be different 10 years from now than it is today. I think my first City Club speech, I talked about the tremendous change that was coming from technology and innovation, how people would have better information to make better decisions, and that they would use that in ways that made sense to them. Well, sometimes that means that they'll get off of my highways and get onto Larry Walsh's. What does that mean to him? How do we make sure that we have a system that works no matter who owns it? I think that we have to have a new way of funding local government transportation infrastructure. If they're going to rely on the state, they're going to be in the same position that we are, and that is waiting and then getting a big boom and then having a big bust, and that doesn't work. We have to enable our local governments to raise funding in different and new ways, and I think that's what we're talking about. I actually have a meeting with the County Engineers Association next week to talk about where are they, what are their needs, how do we come together around funding packages that work for us and work for them as well. So, Ben, I think that it's certainly a work in progress. But as I look at technology and what's happening in the transportation system, I see such a different system 10 years from now than I do today, that we need to prepare ourselves in ways that maybe we don't even understand yet.
Okay. Great minds must think alike, Randy, because we have two questions from two different people here, but it's really the same question. City Club member Ellen Partridge, who's affiliated with Environmental Law and Policy. Ellen, where are you? Way over there? Okay, off to... And Steve Schlickman of Schlickman and Associates. Stephen, where are you sitting today? Okay, over there. Their questions: what are you, IDOT, doing to plan for automated vehicles, and how are you going to go about engaging the public?
So we're doing a lot on automated vehicles. Justine Seidello, who's here with me today, is leading the effort on behalf of the department. And we've started this a long time ago, 2-3 years ago when we got in, because we saw what was coming. And I would say to people, if you think automated vehicles are 20 years away, you're living in a dream world, that they are here and they're here now. There's a lot of elements to it that are beyond what we do at IDOT. And so we've set up a task force internally of the state police, the Secretary of State, the Department of Insurance, and others that are going to be directly affected by how this trend goes, and tried to figure out what we do. Our motto has been, let's not over-regulate. Let's not regulate what we don't know. And we've seen too many states do that. We've seen too many states get out in front thinking where this is going and regulated themselves out of innovation. We may need something at some point as far as legislation, but we don't think we need much today. We're working with companies to test here in Illinois. I think the last time I was here, I talked to somebody who said, well, we're doing all this testing in Michigan and we'd like you to come and see it. And I said, no, I want you to bring your testing here to Illinois. And that's really what we're focused on. We're focused a lot on freight. We think this is an opportunity for Illinois that maybe we have a special niche in what automated freight traffic looks like. What do automated trucks look like? How do they operate? We've got 4 seasons here. We've got interstates. We've got rural areas. We've got urban areas. We think it's a great place for testing. We've coordinated with our academic and research institutions to find ways to do that together. But I think the big sell is, at the end of your question, is what are we doing with the public? It's scary to people to see something new. It's scary to people to say, I'm going to sit in a car and I'm not going to control it. We figured out how to do that on airplanes eventually, and I think we will figure out how to do that on cars, but it's going to take some time, and it's not going to happen overnight. The fact of the matter is that this is so much safer, that automated vehicles are going to make our system so incredibly safe that it is the direction that we have to go. We are going to have over 1,000 deaths on our highways probably this year for the second year in a row. And almost all of them are user error. Almost all of them are not because the car did something, not because the roadway wasn't right. It's because they were on their phone, they were texting, they weren't paying attention. We've got to stop that, and automated vehicles take a lot of that decision-making out of the user's hands. It's not going to be easy. I talked to my mother about it, and she says it will never happen for me. And I said, well, maybe or maybe not, but when it comes that day where you can't drive anymore, maybe an automated vehicle is what you're going to need to get to see your grandchildren and to see us. So it's a work in progress. It's going to be a long stint, but I think the marketing of this and more the education of this has to start now. Now, people get afraid of one accident, and yet we're going to have 1,000 fatalities. We've got to send the message better that this is the future, and it's a good future. It's a future that's going to make it better for all of us.
That's a very good answer. Thank you, Randy. Thank you. Okay, this is from City Club member Harvind Singh. Harvind, where are you sitting today? Right down here. Harvind, how are you? Good. How are you? Very good. We're old friends, by the way. We even spent some time on a boat in Belmont Harbor together many, many years ago. So was I. So was I. Believe me. Anyhow, Roosevelt's New Deal. Boy, Harvind, taking us back to the 1930s. It's only 10 years before that we had the first traffic signal in the city of Chicago. Okay. Roosevelt's New Deal created public infrastructure. Over the many decades since, it seems the value of publicly owned infrastructure is lost. Americans have taken for granted our highways and bridges. What could we do to begin changing this?
Well, I think you're right. I think that we have taken our infrastructure for granted. I tell our team all the time that, you know, they do a good job out there every day and they never hear about it until something goes wrong, and then we hear about it really quickly. We've got to think about the message again. It's all about the message. It's about talking about why it matters. You know, and I'll do it here. How much do you think you spend a month on state gas taxes? I won't make you guess out loud. It's less than $10. Less than $10. I don't know about you, but my cell phone costs me over $200 a month because I have my kids on it. And I don't think twice about writing that check because I want them to have access. I want them to be able to do what they need to do. I want them to be able to call me. And yet $10 a month is what we're spending. People don't have any idea what a bargain they're getting on their transportation system, and they don't feel like they need to understand how they need to invest in it more. Transportation is just something that happens to them. It's just something that's there, and we ought to be smart enough to figure out how to do it with the money we have. That's the public thinking. And the truth is, for years we could do that. You know, it wasn't just, you know, the Roosevelt administration, it was the Eisenhower administration that built the interstate system. It was how we built this transportation system in the 50s and 60s and 70s, from highways to mass transit to airports, that created what we have today, and we take it for granted. I would love to be talking about how we provide more access, new facilities, better transit lines. We've got to talk about how we maintain what we have and how it is a vital link in the connection to the economy that we have to talk about differently, and in how it affects people's lives every day. That's what matters to them. People don't care about congestion for somebody else. People care about why I have to leave work at 3:30 to get to my daughter's 6 o'clock soccer game. That's what they care about. And if we can't find a message that delivers it to them in that way, we're never going to get to where we need to go.
Okay, one last question before we get to our famous Blankenhorn drawing. What do you see happening, if anything, in our nation's capital that will impact on some of the messages that you've talked about, some of your visions?
So I said earlier that I think maybe the most important thing we've got going on is regulatory reform, which I believe is real. You know, every new administration comes in and talks about it. We're actually seeing movement in Washington on regulatory reform that is going to make our processes faster, smoother, more efficient, less expensive. And I think that's a plus. I think the administration is committed to it. I think Congress is committed to it. About funding, I am not sitting in my office waiting for $1 trillion to rain down on me, to be perfectly honest. But I do believe that this administration wants to invest more money in transportation. They floated a gas tax 2 weeks ago. It's not going to go anywhere because Congress doesn't have any interest in it, but they floated it. They realize that there has to be a way to fund transportation infrastructure at the federal level. That honestly, transportation isn't a state-by-state issue. It's a interstate commerce issue, and it's a movement across states issues. Why we have the system we do is where we are, but I think there has to be a bigger federal role in order to make the system work across. The other part of the federal system that really bothers me is that it's just incredibly siloed. You have money for this kind of project and that kind of project and that kind of project, and never do the two meet. We can't be innovative at the state level about how we use federal funds. It's too locked in. I want to help on ports, and yet I find that my hands are tied on what kind of money I can use. That's not the way we ought to be doing business, and that's the kind of thing we're talking to Washington about, is giving us that flexibility to make decisions here in Illinois.
Thank you very much. Let's everybody give Secretary Blankenhorn a